The rope bit into her wrists as the wind rattled the leaves above her, and the tree, old, scarred, unmoving, became a silent witness to her fear. She didn't scream. She never did. She only breathed, slow and shallow, eyes fixed on the dirt road where the bullies had disappeared moments earlier, laughing as if they'd left behind nothing more than a broken fence. But this was the moment everything began to change. Because one call was all it would take, and the man who answered it would rewrite the meaning of justice. Stay with this story to the very end. And if you feel the tension already, like the video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss what comes next. Mara had always been the quiet one on the farm. The kind of girl who learned the language of animals before the language of people, who fixed gates at dawn and mended fences at dusk without asking for help. She kept her head down in town, bought feed with exact change, and returned to the gravel road that led home as quickly as she could. Folks said she was timid. The bullies said she was weak. Neither knew the truth. They didn't know she had married young, far away from this place, in a courthouse that smelled of ink and old wood. They didn't know the ring she wore under her glove, or the promise she kept tucked close to her heart. And they certainly didn't know the man on the other end of the phone she carried, powered off to save battery, waiting for emergencies only. It started like it always did. Snickers at the gas station, a shoulder check in the parking lot, a truck revving too close as she walked the road home. 3 of them this time, jackets bright, confidence loud, boredom cruel. They blocked the road with their truck and told her it was just a joke, told her to smile, told her she thought she was better than them because she kept quiet. Mara said nothing. Silence had always been her shield. But silence can anger men who want noise, and so they pushed, and when she stumbled, they laughed harder. The rope came from the truck bed. The tree was close. The road was empty. They tied her hands with sloppy knots and pulled the rope tight around the trunk, not caring how the bark scraped her skin. "Relax," one of them said, mock gentle. "We'll be back." And then they were gone, dust rising behind them, laughter dissolving into the fields. Mara stood there alone, heart pounding, wrists burning, fear pressing down like a weight on her chest. She tested the knots. Too tight. She looked for help. No houses, no cars, only the long stretch of road and the whisper of wind. For a moment, panic tried to take her. For a moment, she thought of all the reasons she had stayed quiet her whole life. Then she remembered the promise. With shaking fingers, she reached into her pocket and fished out the phone they hadn't noticed. 1 bar of signal blinked weakly. She didn't waste time on words. She pressed a single contact. No name, just a symbol, and the line rang once before it connected. She didn't cry. She didn't explain. She said only, "They tied me to a tree." Mile marker 12. On the other end, there was no shouting, no questions. Just a breath. And then, calm as steel, "I'm on my way." Far from the farm, in a place where silence meant survival and seconds meant life, a man stood up from a briefing table and walked out without asking permission. He moved with purpose, mind already mapping routes, hands already steady. He had trained for chaos, for extraction, for threats in the dark. But this was personal. This was his wife. The quiet farm girl the world mistook for fragile. The woman who had waited, who had endured, who had never once asked him to be anyone but who he was. Back at the tree, Mara closed her eyes and leaned her forehead against the bark. Fear was still there, but something else had joined it now. Certainty. Whatever happened next, she would not be alone. And somewhere on the road, an engine roared to life, carrying a man who did not arrive gently when those he loved were harmed. If this chapter pulled you in, stay with us, because the next moment will change everything. Time stretched in cruel, uneven pieces. Each minute Mara stood bound to the tree felt heavier than the last, as if the earth itself were testing her resolve. The rope had gone numb against her skin, then painful again as blood fought to move through her wrists. She shifted her weight carefully, counting her breaths the way she had learned to do in lonely nights on the farm. Inhale for 4, hold for 4, exhale for 4. Panic was a luxury she couldn't afford. Survival required stillness, awareness, patience. The bullies thought tying her there was the end of the story. They were wrong. It was only the opening move. The sound of an engine reached her before she saw the truck again. Laughter carried on the wind, louder this time, closer. Her pulse spiked, but she didn't scream. She lifted her chin and fixed her gaze down the road, refusing to give them the satisfaction of fear. When the truck rolled to a stop, the doors swung open with exaggerated slowness. One of them clapped, mocking applause echoing through the fields. "Still here?" he said. "Good. We were worried you might wander off." They circled her like predators who mistook calm for surrender, poking at the rope, tugging at it to see how tight it was. Mara said nothing, but inside she counted. Seconds, distance, time since the call. What they didn't notice was how her posture had changed. She wasn't shrinking anymore. She was waiting, far away. The world had narrowed for the man racing toward her. Every mile marker, every curve in the road, every mental calculation clicked into place with ruthless clarity. He didn't speed recklessly. He drove with control, scanning, anticipating. Years of training had burned certain rules into his bones. Don't rush blindly. Don't underestimate. Don't hesitate when the moment comes. His phone lay on the seat beside him, the screen dark now, the message already received. He didn't need more information. He knew the terrain. He knew the threat. And most of all, he knew Mara, knew her strength, her quiet endurance, the way she only called when there was no other choice. Back at the tree, the bullies' game shifted from taunts to threats. One of them lifted a knife, not close enough to cut, just close enough to scare. "Maybe this will teach you to talk next time," he said. Mara's heart slammed against her ribs, but her eyes never left his face. She remembered the nights she had listened to her husband's stories. Stories he never told in detail, only enough to explain why he left, why he trained, why he prepared for worst-case scenarios. She remembered the way he had once taken her hands and said, "If you're ever in danger, you don't argue. You don't explain. You call me." She had followed that rule. Now she trusted him to do the rest. A distant sound cut through the tension. A different engine, deeper, steady, approaching fast. The bullies froze, glancing down the road. "Probably nothing," one muttered, but his voice lacked conviction. The sound grew louder, closer, unmistakable. Mara felt it then, a shift in the air, like a storm changing direction. She straightened as much as the rope allowed. Hope flared, hot and sharp. The truck appeared at the far end of the road, slowing just enough to assess the scene before accelerating again. Dust billowed as it stopped a short distance away. The door opened. A man stepped out, movements precise, eyes scanning, taking in every detail in seconds. The ropes, the tree, the bullies, the knife. He didn't shout. He didn't threaten. His presence alone changed the balance of power, like gravity asserting itself. One of the bullies laughed nervously. "This doesn't concern you," he said, trying to sound tough. The man said nothing, but his gaze flicked to Mara, just for a heartbeat. In that look was recognition, reassurance, and a promise. The bullies felt it too, though they didn't understand it. They sensed that they had misjudged something, someone, very badly. The quiet farm girl wasn't alone anymore, and the man who had arrived wasn't here to negotiate. He was here to end this. Silence settled over the road like a held breath. Even the wind seemed to pause as the man took a step forward, placing himself squarely between Mara and the bullies. Up close. There was nothing flashy about him. No uniform, no weapons on display, no dramatic gestures. Just calm, the kind of calm that comes from years of facing danger and surviving it. His eyes moved once more over the scene, cataloging threats, exits, distances. Then he spoke, voice low even, "Auntie her, now." It wasn't a request. It was an ending disguised as a sentence. One of the bullies scoffed, trying to reclaim bravado. "Or what?" he said, lifting the knife again. That was the mistake. The man didn't rush him. He didn't raise his voice. He simply shifted his stance, weight balanced, hands relaxed at his sides, as if he were stepping into a familiar drill. Mara recognized it instantly. She had seen this posture in quiet moments at home, when he thought no one was watching. It was the posture of someone ready to move with precision. "You have 10 seconds, he said. His eyes never left the one with the knife. "After that, I will move, and you will not like the result." The bullies laughed again, but it came out thin and uneven. They weren't laughing because they felt powerful. They were laughing because fear needed somewhere to go. The countdown began, not out loud, but in the tightening of the air, in the way the man's focus sharpened, in the way Mara's pulse steadied instead of spiking. When the knife hand twitched, everything happened at once. The man moved, not fast in a wild way, but fast in a controlled, devastating way. He closed the distance in seconds, disarming the bully with a twist of the wrist that sent the knife skidding across the road. A sharp shove put another bully flat on his back. Breath knocked from his lungs. The third stumbled backward, shock written across his face as he realized the rules of this encounter were not the ones he'd expected. The man never overreached, never struck more than necessary. Each movement was efficient, practiced, final. Mara watched with wide eyes, not in fear but in awe. This was the side of her husband the world never saw. To the town, he was just a quiet man who came and went, polite, distant. To her, he was warmth and patience, steady hands and gentle words. And now, to these bullies, he was something else entirely, a force they had no defense against. Within moments, all three were on the ground, groaning, scrambling away, their confidence shattered. The man stood over them, breathing steady, gaze cold. "You will leave," he said. "You will not come back. You will not speak her name. And if I ever hear that you have harmed anyone like this again, I will not stop where I stopped today." There was no threat in his tone, only certainty. They didn't argue. They ran, tripping over each other as they fled down the road, fear finally louder than their cruelty. Only when they were gone did the man turn back to Mara. In an instant, the hardness in his face melted, replaced by concern so raw it hurt to see. He crossed the space between them and went straight to the rope, hands careful, gentle as he worked the knots loose. "I've got you," he murmured, voice breaking just slightly. As the rope fell away, Mara sagged forward, and he caught her, pulling her into his arms. She buried her face against his chest, breathing him in, grounding herself in the reality of his presence. "I knew you'd come," she whispered, tears finally spilling over. He held her tighter. "Always," he said. "No matter what." He wrapped his jacket around her shoulders, shielding her from the world, and for a moment, they stayed like that. Road empty, danger gone, two lives rejoined at the exact moment they'd nearly been torn apart. As they walked back toward the truck, Mara glanced over her shoulder at the tree, at the place where fear had tried to claim her. It no longer held power over her. She wasn't just the quiet farm girl anymore, not because of what her husband had done, but because of what she had endured. And the man beside her, the Delta Force soldier who had crossed worlds to reach her, knew this was only the beginning of the reckoning that would follow. The drive home was quiet, but it wasn't the silence of fear anymore. It was the silence of aftermath, heavy with everything that had almost happened and everything that still needed healing. Mara sat wrapped in his jacket, fingers laced tightly with his, watching the familiar fields roll past the window as if seeing them for the first time. Each fence post, each bend in the road felt like a marker of survival. When they reached the farmhouse, the porch light flicked on, spilling warmth across the yard. He parked, walked around, and lifted her gently, as if she weighed nothing at all. Inside, the kettle boiled, the dog thumped its tail, and the ordinary sounds of home stitched the torn edges of the night back together. They sat at the kitchen table until dawn softened the windows. He checked her wrists, cleaned the scrapes, listened without interrupting as she told him every detail she had held back while tied to that tree. The rope, the laughter, the waiting. He didn't flinch. He didn't rush her. He let her set the pace, because this part of the mission belonged to her. When she finished, he nodded once, jaw set, and said quietly, "This ends now." She knew what he meant. Not revenge. Accountability. Protection. The kind that makes sure it never happens again to anyone. By mid-morning, the road hummed with unfamiliar vehicles. The sheriff arrived with a careful tone and a hard look. Statements were taken, photographs logged, knots examined. The bullies were found, shaken, defiant at first, then silent when the evidence stacked higher than their bravado. The story spread through town like wind through wheat. Not with the sharp edge of gossip, but with something closer to shame. People realized how close they'd been, how often they'd looked away when cruelty passed by in a jacket and a grin. Doors opened. Apologies came, some clumsy, some sincere. Mara accepted none and all. She listened, nodded, and kept moving forward. In the days that followed, she changed, not into someone louder, but into someone steadier. She walked the road again, head up, shoulders squared, not daring the world to test her, simply refusing to be small. The tree remained where it was, rope scars still faint on the bark. One afternoon, she stopped there with her husband. He asked if she wanted it cut down. She shook her head. "No," she said. "I want it to stand." They left it as a marker, not of fear, but of the moment everything turned. At night, when the house was quiet, he told her a little more about the life he lived away from the farm. Not the tactics or the missions, but the why. Why he trained. Why he believed in preparation over luck. Why he believed that love was not fragile, but forged. She listened, hand resting over his heart, understanding at last that strength didn't always look like noise. Sometimes it looked like patience. Sometimes it looked like a single call answered without hesitation. Weeks later, the town held a small gathering at the feed store. No speeches, no banners. Just people standing together, acknowledging what had happened and what would not be tolerated again. Mara didn't speak. She didn't have to. Her presence said enough. The quiet farm girl had been tied to a tree, and the world had learned a lesson it would not forget. Silence does not mean surrender, and kindness is not weakness. Somewhere between the fields and the road, courage had taken root. On the first cool morning of autumn, Mara and her husband walked the fence line together, repairing what time had worn down. The work was simple, honest. As the sun climbed, she smiled, not because the past was gone, but because the future was hers. One call had brought him home, yes, but it was her endurance, her choice to survive, that had carried them both to this moment. Justice had arrived not with spectacle, but with resolve, and loved, quiet, unbreakable, stood guard over the farm. If this story stayed with you, please like the video and subscribe to the channel for more powerful, emotional stories that remind us where true strength lives.